I am Hale, a 28-year-old software developer from Boston. My life was pretty normal until my mom died when I was 16. Dad remarried Victoria just a year later. On my 21st birthday, I was supposed to receive a substantial inheritance from my mother's trust. Instead, that day became the beginning of a nightmare. My stepmother Victoria accused me of something unthinkable, something I never did. My father believed her without question, and I lost everything that mattered. It took 7 years before the truth finally came to light. Before I take you through the darkest chapter of my life, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit subscribe if you want to hear how truth eventually conquers lies even after 7 years of injustice. Growing up in suburban Boston, I had what most would consider an ideal childhood. My parents, Michael and Elizabeth, created a warm, loving home. My mom was the heart of our family, always planning weekend adventures, helping with school projects, and making sure our house was the one where all the neighborhood kids wanted to hang out. My dad, a successful business owner of a construction supply company, worked hard but always made time for family dinners and my baseball games. When I turned 15, everything changed. Mom started losing weight rapidly. She complained about back pain that would not go away. After several doctor visits and tests, we received the devastating news: pancreatic cancer, already advanced. The following year was a blur of hospital visits, treatments, and watching my vibrant mother slowly fade away. What I did not know then was that Mom, always the planner, had been preparing for the worst. She had created a trust fund for me that would become accessible when I turned 21. It included her inheritance from her parents, her personal savings, and a life insurance policy amounting to approximately $1.2 million. She also made sure that our family vacation property on Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire would be part of my inheritance. I was 16 when she died on a quiet Sunday morning. Dad and I were both at her bedside, holding her hands as she took her final breath. The following months were excruciating. Dad threw himself into work while I withdrew into grief. Our home, once filled with laughter, became eerily silent. Just 11 months after Mom died, Dad dropped a bombshell. He had been dating Victoria, his 32-year-old office manager, and they were getting married. I was blindsided. Victoria was 15 years younger than my father, and nothing like my mother. Where Mom had been warm and nurturing, Victoria was cold and calculated. She had sleek, dark hair, designer clothes, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. From the moment she moved in, tension filled our home. Victoria made it clear that she was not interested in being my stepmom. When Dad was around, she maintained a facade of friendliness, but the moment he left, her demeanor changed completely. She would make subtle comments that undermined my connection with Dad. Things like, "Your father mentioned how disappointed he was about your math grade," or, "I think your dad is getting tired of always cleaning up after you." None of it was true, but it planted seeds of doubt in my relationship with my father. By the time I graduated high school, I could not wait to escape. I accepted an offer from a university in California, as far from Boston as possible. During college, I limited my visits home to major holidays, and even then, I would stay with my mother's sister, Aunt Judy, claiming it was more convenient. Throughout those years, Victoria worked steadily to strengthen her influence over my father. She redecorated our home, removing most traces of my mother. Family photos disappeared, replaced by modern art and pictures of her and Dad on vacations I knew nothing about. With each visit home, I felt increasingly like a stranger in my childhood house. As my 21st birthday approached, I received a letter from Mr. Donovan, our family attorney, requesting a meeting regarding my mother's trust. This was the first time I learned the full extent of what my mother had left for me. I called Dad to discuss the meeting, and he seemed oddly uncomfortable changing the subject quickly. I flew home for my birthday weekend, planning to meet Mr. Donovan on Monday morning. Dad picked me up from the airport, and I noticed immediately how much Victoria had changed him. He seemed constantly anxious, checking his phone whenever it buzzed with texts from her. That night, Victoria organized a birthday dinner at an expensive restaurant downtown. Throughout the meal, she kept bringing up how generous my father was, how he supported various family members financially, and how difficult his business had become recently. Dad remained mostly silent, nodding occasionally. When we returned home, I overheard them arguing in their bedroom. Victoria's voice was sharp as she said, $1.2 million and the lake house. That is ridiculous, Michael. We could use that money for our future. Your business needs capital right now. This should be our decision, not Elizabeth's from the grave. I went to bed troubled, but tried to reassure myself that the trust was legally binding. My mother had wanted to secure my future, and tomorrow I would meet with Mr. Donovan to make it official. The next morning changed everything. I came downstairs to find Victoria sitting at the kitchen island crying. When she looked up, I noticed a bruise on her cheek and another on her wrist. Dad was making coffee, his back to me, his shoulders tense. Dad, I am ready whenever you are to head to Mr. Donovan's office, I said. He turned slowly, his face a mask of barely contained fury. There will be no meeting today, he said in a voice I barely recognized. Victoria let out a small sob and turned away. That is when Dad exploded. How could you do this? He shouted at me. Your own stepmother. After everything she has done for this family, I stood frozen, completely confused. What are you talking about? Victoria claims you came into our room last night when I was in the shower, he said, his voice shaking. She says you threatened her, told her she would never see a penny of your mother's money, and when she tried to leave the room, you grabbed her and pushed her against the wall. My blood ran cold. That is absolutely not true, I stammered. Dad, I would never. You know me. But he did not know me anymore. Or perhaps he did not want to. Victoria had spent years poisoning our relationship, and now she had delivered the final blow. Get out of my house, he spat. I do not want to see you again. If you try to contact Victoria or come near her, I will press charges. I tried desperately to defend myself, but nothing I said mattered. By that afternoon, I had received a call from my father informing me he was disowning me and would be taking legal action to block my access to the inheritance, citing my violent behavior as just cause. The days following my expulsion from home were a blur of panic and disbelief. I stayed at a cheap motel near the airport, using most of my remaining savings. I called my father repeatedly, but he had blocked my number. Emails went unanswered. I even wrote a physical letter pouring my heart out, explaining that I had never touched Victoria, never threatened her, never even had a private conversation with her that weekend. The letter was returned unopened, marked return to sender. In desperation, I contacted Mr. Donovan, but he regretfully informed me that he could no longer represent my interests, as my father had retained him to begin proceedings to block my access to the trust. He recommended another attorney who might be able to help. Thomas Reed, the attorney I met with 2 days later, was direct and not particularly encouraging. Without evidence to counter Victoria's claims, and with my father fully supporting her story, contesting this would be an uphill battle. Especially concerning was that Victoria had apparently filed a police report, though she had declined to press charges out of concern for the family, a move that made her appear compassionate while effectively blackening my name. My father, as the secondary trustee, had significant power over the trust until I took possession. My mother had never anticipated he would use that power against me. The legal process to freeze the trust and reassess the inheritance conditions had already begun. I returned to California for my final year of college, but everything had changed. My grades plummeted as I struggled to focus through the fog of betrayal. I took on additional jobs waiting tables and doing late-night security shifts to make up for the financial support I had expected. My planned apartment fell through, forcing me to crash on a classmate's couch for 2 months until I found affordable housing with 5 other students in a cramped off-campus house. When graduation approached, I sent my father an invitation with a brief note. Despite everything, I would like you to be there. He never responded, and on the day I scanned the audience in vain. No one from my family attended. Aunt Judy, my mother's sister, had passed away from a stroke earlier that year, leaving me truly alone. I made a decision then. Boston held nothing for me but painful memories. When a small tech startup in Seattle offered me an entry-level programming position, I accepted immediately. The salary was modest, but it was enough to rent a tiny studio apartment and start fresh. Seattle became my sanctuary. The constant rain matched my mood initially, but gradually I began to build a life. My first year there, I focused entirely on work, putting in long hours to learn everything I could and prove my value to the company. Dating seemed impossible. How could I trust anyone when my own father had so easily believed the worst of me? My roommate Jason became my first real friend in Seattle. We met through a roommate finder app when I was looking to upgrade from my studio. Jason was outgoing where I was reserved, but somehow our opposite personalities worked well together. He was the first person I told the whole story to, and his indignation on my behalf was strangely healing. "Man, that is some cold, calculated stuff," he said after I had finished. "Your stepmom played chess while everyone else was playing checkers." His validation of my experience helped me begin to trust again. Slowly, I built a small circle of friends through Jason's connections and my workplace. Every few months, I would receive updates about my father, through distant relatives or old family friends who still kept in touch. Victoria had convinced my father to sell our family vacation home on Lake Winnipesaukee, the place where my happiest childhood memories had been made. They had bought a new vacation property in Florida instead. My father's business was reportedly struggling, requiring significant personal investment to stay afloat. At 25, I received formal legal notification that access to my trust had been permanently revoked based on behavior unbefitting the expressed wishes of the trust creator. The legal language was cold and final. After consulting with another attorney, I was advised that contesting at this stage would be costly and unlikely to succeed without new evidence. The 7-day window to appeal passed, as I grappled with whether to keep fighting or finally let go. Around this time, I started seeing a therapist to work through my unresolved anger and trust issues. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that while the situation was deeply unfair, holding on to rage was only hurting me, not Victoria or my father. I learned techniques to manage my emotions and began to focus more on building my future than dwelling on past injustices. At 26, I was promoted to senior developer at my company. My financial situation had stabilized, though it was nowhere near what it would have been with my inheritance. More importantly, I met Sarah at a friend's housewarming party. She was a graphic designer with a quick wit and a warmth that reminded me just slightly of my mother. Our relationship progressed slowly, my caution obvious. After 6 months of dating, I finally told her about my family situation. To my surprise, her response was not just sympathy but practical. "Have you tried reaching out again?" she asked. "People change, situations change. Maybe after all this time, your father might be willing to at least hear your side." I had not considered this possibility. In my mind, that door was permanently closed. But Sarah's question planted a seed. What if enough time had passed? What if Victoria's influence had waned? I drafted several emails to my father, but deleted each one, still too afraid of rejection to press send. Life continued. My career advanced. My relationship with Sarah deepened. We moved in together in an apartment overlooking Puget Sound. I was building a good life, even if it was haunted by the ghost of what might have been. Then, a week after my 28th birthday, everything changed again. An email from my father appeared in my inbox. 7 years of silence, broken by a simple subject line. "We need to talk. Can we meet?" I stared at my father's email for a full day before showing it to Sarah. "You have to respond," she insisted, "even if it is just to get closure." Still, I hesitated. What could he possibly say after 7 years that would make any difference? My therapist agreed with Sarah, suggesting that regardless of the outcome, facing this situation directly might help me finally move forward. After 3 days of deliberation, I replied with a brief agreement to meet, suggesting a public location in Seattle rather than inviting him to our apartment. 2 weeks later, I sat in the lobby of the Grand Hyatt downtown, my knee bouncing nervously as I waited. When my father walked through the revolving doors, I almost did not recognize him. The strong, confident man from my youth had been replaced by someone who looked a decade older than his 54 years. His hair had gone completely gray, his face gaunt, his confident stride now measured and careful. "Hale," he said simply. When he reached me, his voice catching on my name. We moved to a quiet corner of the lobby bar. For several minutes neither of us spoke, just sipped water and avoided eye contact. Finally, he broke the silence. "I made a terrible mistake, son. Several, actually. I do not even know where to begin." The words I had imagined for years now hanging in the air between us. I said nothing, waiting. "Victoria and I are divorced," he continued. "Have been for almost a year now." I nodded still, not trusting myself to speak. About 18 months ago, I received an email from Rachel, Victoria's former assistant. She had quit a few years before to move to Chicago. The email contained documentation she had secretly kept. Photos of Victoria applying makeup to create bruises. Audio recordings of Victoria planning exactly what she would say to me about you. Evidence that she had been systematically embezzling from my business for years. My father's hands trembled as he slid his phone across the table, showing me images of the evidence Rachel had compiled. Rachel confessed that she had helped Victoria stage the whole thing. Victoria had noticed Rachel catching her in various lies, and used that leverage to force Rachel's compliance. Rachel said she was afraid of losing her job if she did not help. She finally reached out because the guilt had been eating at her for years. My mind reeled, processing the confirmation of what I had known all along. Victoria had methodically planned to turn my father against me specifically to gain control of my inheritance. She had seen the money, as in her words, captured in one recording. Unnecessary competition for resources. More shocking was what my father said next. I also discovered that Victoria had been systematically draining my business accounts. The construction supply company that had been in my family for 2 generations is now gone. She convinced me to sell the Lake Winnipesaukee property, claiming we needed capital for the business, but most of that money disappeared as well. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my first words since his arrival. "It has been 7 years." My father's eyes filled with tears. "Because I am running out of time, Hale. I have stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe less." The cruel irony was not lost on me. The same disease that had taken my mother was now claiming my father. And just as with my mother's death, Victoria had manipulated the situation for financial gain. "When I got the diagnosis, I started putting my affairs in order," he continued. "That is when I really began investigating where all the money had gone." After confronting Victoria, she left, taking what remained of our joint accounts. The divorce was finalized quickly after Rachel's evidence came to light. I wish I could say I felt immediate forgiveness or even satisfaction at his regret. Instead, I felt a complex swirl of emotions, vindication tangled with lingering hurt, and the sudden unwelcome awareness that my time for reconciliation was limited. "Why did you not believe me?" I finally asked the question that had haunted me for 7 years. He looked away, shame evident in his posture. "Victoria had been working on me for years, planting small doubts about your stability, your resentment of her. She claimed you had anger issues at school that you were hiding from me. She showed me emails that I now know were fabricated where you supposedly threatened her. By the time she made the accusation, I was primed to believe it." He paused. "It is no excuse. I failed you as a father in every possible way." In the following hours, we talked more than we had in the previous decade. He detailed his efforts to make amends, including the legal reversal of the trust block. My mother's inheritance, what remained of it, would be returned to me, along with additional compensation from what he had managed to recover in the divorce. The lake house was gone, but he had set aside funds to help me purchase a new property if I wanted. I shared details of my life in Seattle, my career progression, and eventually Sarah. I did not make it easy for him. I asked hard questions about his choices and his willingness to discard our relationship so readily. His answers were not always satisfying, but they were honest, stripped of the defensiveness that might have been present in a man with more time. That evening, I introduced him to Sarah over dinner. She was cautious, but kind, asking about his treatments, and listening to stories about my childhood that I had rarely shared with her. Watching them interact, I caught glimpses of what might have been and what still might be possible in the limited time remaining. Before he returned to his hotel, he mentioned that Rachel had provided a formal statement to his attorney, legally clearing my name of any wrongdoing. Victoria had left the country after the divorce settlement, moving to Portugal, with a new partner she had apparently been seeing for some time. She had faced no legal consequences for her actions, a fact that still burned. But I was learning to accept that justice often looks different than we expect. "I do not deserve your forgiveness," my father said as we parted. "But I hope you will give me a chance to be in your life again, for whatever time I have left." I did not promise forgiveness that night, but I did promise to try. The next 6 months brought a strange new chapter in my relationship with my father. After his initial visit to Seattle, I helped arrange for him to receive treatment at the Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, one of the top oncology centers in the country. He rented a small apartment nearby, and our cautious reunion continued. At first, our interactions were fragile, punctuated by long silences and careful conversation. There were moments when anger would surface unexpectedly, a sharp comment about a missed milestone or a bitter reference to Victoria. But there were also moments of connection that I had thought forever lost. One evening, as we sat on my apartment balcony watching the sunset over Puget Sound, he pulled out an old photo album I had not seen in years. "I found this in storage," he said. "Your mom put it together the year before she got sick." We spent hours flipping through photos of family camping trips, birthday parties, and ordinary moments that suddenly seemed precious. He told stories I had never heard, about how my parents met, about my mother's dreams for my future, about the day I was born. It was the first time he had spoken freely about my mother since before Victoria entered our lives. With the legal barriers removed, I finally gained access to my mother's trust. True to his word, my father had added substantial additional funds as compensation for the years of lost access. I used a portion to help with his medical expenses, ensuring he received the best possible care. One night, when his pain medication made him unusually talkative, he confessed his deepest regret. "I betrayed both you and your mother," he said. "She trusted me to protect you, and instead, I let someone destroy our family for money. There is no making up for that." I had no comforting response. He was right. But as his condition deteriorated, I found my anger giving way to a different emotion. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. My father had been manipulated by a skilled predator who had targeted him at his most vulnerable. His weakness had cost us both dearly, but holding on to resentment would not restore what was lost. 3 weeks before he died, Sarah and I got engaged. We had not planned to move so quickly, but it became important to me that my father be present for this milestone. The small celebration in his apartment was nothing like the engagement party I might have imagined years earlier. But seeing his genuine joy at our happiness provided a measure of healing I had not expected. My father passed away on a Tuesday morning in October. I was holding his hand, just as we had both held my mother's years before. The funeral was small, attended mostly by former colleagues and a few distant relatives. Victoria did not appear, though I half expected her to make some dramatic entrance. In the year since his death, I have had time to reflect on the cost of false accusations and blind trust. The inheritance was finally mine, but the true value was not in the money. The real legacy was in the lessons learned about truth's resilience, the danger of manipulation, and the complicated possibility of forgiveness. Sarah and I used part of the recovered funds to purchase a small house near Green Lake. In the backyard stands a young maple tree planted in memory of both my parents. We are expecting our first child in spring, a daughter we plan to name Elizabeth after my mother. I established a scholarship fund in my father's name for students who have overcome family trauma. It feels like the right way to transform our painful story into something that might help others find their way back from betrayal. The truth took 7 years to surface in my case. 7 years of estrangement, doubt, and rebuilding a life from scratch. But even after all that time, the truth found its way into the light. Not in time to restore everything that was lost, but in time to create space for healing before it was too late. Has anyone in your life ever tried to turn family against you? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story of truth finally prevailing touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family betrayal. Remember, sometimes it takes years for justice to come, but the truth always finds its way into the light. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it brings some comfort to those still waiting for their vindication.